Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Nicole Bush. I'm Director of Alumni Career and Professional Development here at Tulane University. We're very excited to have you here, and we're excited to have our alum, Phil Applebaum, here. So I'm going to hand it over to him in just a minute, but I want to make sure you know that this session is being recorded, and it will be posted on our YouTube channel following this afternoon. And in the meantime, while we still have people coming in, I just invite you to introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know where you're joining us from, maybe what you studied at Tulane or what you're doing now, whatever you prefer. And we'll get started in just a second. If you have questions, you can put those in the chat. You send them to me as well. If you have any tech issues, let those to me directly, please, if you can. So thanks. All right, Phil, whenever you're ready.
Great. Thanks, Nicole. And thank you for having me here. So excited to be able to get back into facilitating a little bit, especially for my fellow Tulaneans. So thank you all for being here. Quick note, I don't know if you all have heard, and maybe some of y'all are still in New Orleans, but my sincere condolences go out to anyone that might still be there from the weather that happened last night and that tornado that tore through just east of the city. So if anyone's in New Orleans, hope you're doing well and hope you're getting what you need. But just wanted to say that it's always, always a little rough when we hear about things happening down there. So just wanted to say that out front. But my name is Phil Applebaum. I'm the Director of Talent and Culture at the Pacific Legal Foundation. We're a nonprofit law firm based up in DC. Happy to talk about that more, but that is not the important topic for this session. What we will be discussing is never stop growing up, invoking a growth mindset. And I want to always lay out the goals for our session before we jump into it. So we'll start there with the goals for today's session. I'll have an ask that I want to put forth to all of you for how I'd like to make this session work and your engagement. We'll then do a deep dive into growth mindset. I recognize that some of you may already know what the growth mindset is. So I want to go a little bit further there and actually apply those concepts. And then I want to wrap up with the importance and pain of feedback and its helpful aspects with a growth mindset. So that's gonna be our agenda for today. I'm gonna try to move through this as quickly as we can while still giving it the time that it needs. And I'll do my best to hold at least 10 or 15 minutes towards the end of the session. Okay, so there's our agenda, and I wanna open up with our goals. So the first goal here is to figure out where we are limiting ourselves in our mindset and create greater awareness around where that's coming from. We all have a growth mindset in some things, a fixed limiting mindset in other things, and it's really important for us to identify where those are. So we're going to start there, and then we're going to move into the feedback section I mentioned and really work to build appreciation for feedback and reflect on how it can help us grow. We've all gotten feedback. We've all given feedback, probably good, probably bad. And there's a lot of value there. And I think it's really strongly related to a growth mindset. So that's going to be our second goal for today. Okay, so with those two goals in mind, I want to move into my ask. So the first asking that I have is that you turn your cameras on. I know in some company cultures, it's not as important to have your camera on. In others, it's more important to have your camera on. But I really prefer if I can see your faces. That way I know if the jokes that I'm making are landing or if they're crumbling and I should just cut the comedy entirely. So if you wouldn't mind putting your camera on, I would really appreciate it. If you're eating lunch, if you're having a bad hair day, I understand, but it's always better for a session when we have our cameras on. So I ask that you do that, and I understand if you decide not to. That's the first thing. Second thing, when we talk about a growth mindset, it can be a very intrusive, sort of vulnerable topic. And that's important because if we're looking to grow, we have to look within ourselves and understand where our faults may lie, where we're holding ourselves back, where we might have some fear or some limiting mindsets that's really tying us down and not letting us grow the way that we want to grow. So my big ask today is that you open yourself up to that. Allow yourself to explore where you might be falling behind, to try to understand where you're having that fixed mindset so that we can attack it and try to open up a bit more. So I will let you know that at times we're going to be putting you into some breakout groups, usually just with one other person, maybe with two others, and I'm going to ask you to share with them. So, throughout this session, I'll give you a heads up when we're going to go into that mode, but I'm putting this out front of you all, so you know that that's really going to be a big part of this session. I don't know if you know what you signed up for, but that's what's going to be happening today. So want to put that in front of you. And also just say that, if you have questions, if you have ideas, I'm going to be asking for them throughout the session. Please feel free to come on the mic and not just use the chat box. That's always a great option too, but it's always better if we had a little more voice than just my own. I can get sick of my own voice. So would love to hear from you all. And again, it's part of opening up and being willing to put yourself out there and share. We're all friendly strangers in here. So please feel free to do that. Okay, so that's my ask. Again, try to be open, try to really share and explore internally, because that's going to be a big part of this session today. With all that in mind, I want to move to our sort of opening topic here. I will just say out front, this slide has the most content on it out of any slide in the deck. Don't worry, everything else on here is going to be a lot more pared down, but we'll start here. So you all came in here seeing that the title of this session had to do with the growth mindset. So I want to start off just at the top and ask the question, what is a growth mindset? Anyone out in the audience feel like they understand that enough to come on and share? And again, feel free to use the chat box as well if you prefer it. All right, no takers so far. That's all right. I'll give you this one, but I'm going to really try to ask for the next one. So a growth mindset is a belief that one's basic abilities, what they have within them, can grow through dedication and hard work. And that it's not just about your brains. It's not just about your physical talents. That's just a starting point. But there's always something we can do to build on what we have innate to improve our abilities and rise to the challenges that are in front of us. This is where we probably all want to be. This sounds great, right? We all want to believe that there's ways we can grow and take on challenges in new ways. So that's the goal here, right? The goal is to really be able to be in that growth mindset. Now, there's an opposite here, right? There's something else that we're going to be tacking here today, and that is a fixed mindset. So like I said, I'll give you the first one, but I would really love someone to come on and either share through the mic or put in the chat box. What do you think a fixed mindset is? And I will do the dreaded tactic of calling on someone. All right, I see a Janice Simmons. You're the lucky winner. How about you unmute and share? What do you think a fixed mindset might be?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I think someone that is closed-minded, maybe negative, never sees the bright side of things.
Yeah, that's great. There's well, I won't say it's great because that doesn't sound like a great place to be, but you're on the right track. That when someone has that fixed mindset, it tends to lead them towards sort of a negative space, glass half empty, not all that optimistic about the ways that they might be able to change and grow. That's great. Anyone else want to add to that? Tim, how about you? Want to come on and maybe add to what Janice just shared?
Sure. I think that a fixed mindset really is the opposite of what you mentioned. That it's not a starting point. That people really feel that there's concrete limitations on what they can do and what can be developed based on their background, based on their talent, based on where they are right now.
Yep. That's great, Tim. That was exactly right. So what we have is this belief that one's basic qualities are just fixed, that there isn't really much we can do to grow and improve in one way or another. And like Janice said, that can lead us to some pretty dark places. It's hard to feel optimistic about how you can grow if your belief is, well, I'm stuck. There's nothing else I can do to improve. Now, you'll see here I reference Carol Dweck, who is kind of the godmother of this idea of a growth mindset. Now, I'll show a cover of her book that's called The Growth Mindset later on, but she really is one of the most influential thinkers in this space. So we've defined our terms, what a growth mindset is, what a fixed mindset is. Now, I said before that I'm going to ask you to be vulnerable, but I hate asking that without doing it myself first. So what I'm going to do now is share a little bit about myself and where I have both a growth and a fixed mindset. And then I'm going to ask you to do it too. So pay attention. First thing where I have a growth mindset is in chess. Y'all, I am bad at chess. I'll admit that right out front. If you know what ELO is, it's the ranking system. I'm low down there. I'm like 500-600. Grandmasters are like 2,800. It's bad, but I love it. I find so much fascination with it. I'm a big puzzle guy. I'm a big board game guy. And chess is always something to learn. And I'm getting better and better slowly and slowly, but I'm getting there. So chess is one thing where it's really tough. It's a hard game, but for whatever reason, I find an affinity for it and I keep on growing with it. So I have a growth mindset around chess. Second thing that I have a growth mindset, my marriage. There's a picture of me and my wife on our wedding day. And I think it's an important thing to consider, because when we think about growth, we usually think about tasks or chores or parts of our work. But our relationships is another area where we can have a growth or a fixed mindset. Maybe you have that family member in your mind that every Thanksgiving you just try to avoid because there's just no way to make that relationship better, right? So I put my marriage on here, A, little bit of vulnerability on my part, but B, to say that there's always ways we can grow, not just in our abilities with our tasks or our skills, but also with how we can relate to other people. So that's a really important one, at least for me. Now, this is a professional development series, so I'm not just going to talk about my games and my personal life. I'm also going to talk about something professional for me. And another place where I have a really good growth mindset is around being a supervisor. Kind of new at it myself. It's only been for about a year or two, but I've really worked hard to understand where my direct reports are struggling, where they're really strong, try to create good learning opportunities for them, really seek out feedback and learn where I can grow. Something I'm really excited to be doing and really passionate about. So it's somewhere where I also have a growth mindset. So these are the three things that came to mind for me really quickly when I thought about my growth mindset, and they're fun to talk about. Here are the things that aren't as much fun to talk about. Can anyone here read Farsi? I can't. I plugged this into Google Translator. What I plugged in was foreign language, and apparently this is what foreign language is in Farsi. I have a really fixed mindset around learning foreign languages. I studied Hebrew through lower school, middle school, high school, even for a semester or two at Tulane, and I just never got the handle on it. I have a really fixed mindset around this. In my mind, some people have an aptitude for language and other people don't, and I'm one of those other people. So language is somewhere where I struggle. I just was in Paris and London, and I thought about learning French. I thought about learning how to actually understand some people that live in London. They have some crazy accents, but just never really took off because I have a fixed mindset there. So that's one. For you younger folks in the crowd, or maybe for those that have children that are video game obsessed like I am, here's a video game that I am not great at that I don't think I can get better at. It's called Fortnite. And again, fixed mindsets can come in a lot of different places: our relationships, our work, things outside of our activities, our hobbies. Even video games, it can come in a lot of different ways. So there's one more. And then the last one, again, let's look at the work side of things. Research, just somewhere that I just don't feel like I have much capability. I don't think I'm very good at it. I get distracted, I lose focus, I start looking to the wrong things. And it's just somewhere where I've always struggled. Now, my answer to that is to avoid it. I found myself in positions where I really don't have to do much research. Maybe that's not the healthiest way to go, but that's how I've handled it. That's how I've dealt with it. So I put this out front to say that we can have a growth mindset in a lot of things, a fixed mindset in a lot of things. And it's always the goal to try to shift those things that are fixed into growth to really help ourselves move forward with how we want to grow. So here are my growth and my fixed mindsets. What I'm going to ask next is for you to grab some pen and paper, open up a Word document somewhere where you can take some notes or just write something down, and write down your fixed mindsets. Try to get maybe 2 or 3 out there, just like I did, right? It can be anything. It can be a hobby. It could be something at work. It could be a relationship, whatever it might be. but it's really important to think about this and try to write some down. So after you do that, build that list out. Again, at least 3. If you can go further than that, that's great. And then I want you to consider what they might have in common. What are some common threads? For me, something that's really common with my fixed mindsets is things that I've tried a lot, I've put a lot of work into, and I just haven't gotten better at it. That's something that leads to me having a fixed mindset around something. Maybe it's different for you. So write those down. And then the second question to consider, how true is it that you can't grow in your ability around those things? How true is that really? Something to consider. So I'll give you a minute or 2 to write those down, and then I'm going to come back with another request. So I'll give you a minute or 2 now. Write down that list of fixed mindsets. Think about what they might have in common. And think about how true it is that you can't grow. All right, hopefully we've been able to put together a little bit of a list. And now what I would like you all to do next is pick one. Pick one that you want to shift and think about what your first step might be to make that happen. What could that very first step be? When we think about making these shifts, they're really heavy sometimes. We're fixed on these things because we just haven't been able to push through them no matter how hard we try. They're really big. So I think it's important to narrow it down. Just think, what could that first step be to make that happen? I'm going to give a minute to think about this, and then I'm actually going to put you into breakouts. I'm going to put you with a buddy. And what I'd love for you to do is share that one thing where you have a fixed mindset, and then share what that first step might be and have a little discussion about it. Maybe they have some ideas for you as well. So I'm going to put you into those breakout groups, give you about 4 minutes total. So 2 minutes for each. I'll send a message when we've hit 2 minutes. And then we're going to come back and we'll have a little bit of a share out with that. Any questions about those instructions before I put you into breakout groups? It looks like we have everyone back now. Now, when you came back, I saw a lot of really beautiful smiling faces. I didn't see any bad hair days. So it tells me a lot of y'all were willing to have your camera on in your little breakout group. So just again, if you feel like turning your camera on, I wouldn't mind. All right, so what I'd like to do now is put someone on the spot. Isn't that always fun? I'd love to hear from someone about their partner's fixed mindset and their great idea they had about that first step they can make to shift that fixed mindset to a growth mindset. So you don't have to be vulnerable about yourself, but you get to brag about your partner instead. So I'd love for someone to come on and do that for us.
Hey, Phil. Can you hear me?
I can.
So interesting that you asked us to talk about our partners. I'm hopeful that they feel comfortable with us sharing what they have shared with us in the breakout. But we talked a little bit about, and it was something that, there's a catch-22, I guess, from my perspective, because he was describing a fixed mindset in the way that he approaches his relationship with his son. So, one of them wanting to do it one way and one of them wanting to do it the other. I don't have children, so I say take everything or any advice I would offer with the largest grain of salt. So I don't know that I'm the best to give advice or suggestions on that. But I guess I identified maybe what I would think would be the first step in just addressing any sort of fixed mindset with any relationship. So take out maybe the component of parent-child relationship. which would be to try to find someone who is of a like kind experience or has already experienced a like kind scenario. So somebody who is either currently going through the same thing or has come out on the other side of the same thing. But then also recognizing that there may be a challenge in that you then have to find someone who is either already going through that or who has already gone through that. So you might have to look beyond your kind of inner circle of friends in order to reach that. But I always find that to be of use to me in using other people's experiences kind of to pick their brain maybe.
Yeah, that's great. Well, first off, major props to whomever that was for sharing something that's pretty vulnerable. It's pretty deep, and maybe it's something that you're really struggling with. Like I said before, relationships absolutely can be fixed or can be in growth. So really impressive that you were able to pull that up and to share that with your partner. So that's the first thing. Second thing, it's a great idea, Marge. You know, what you sort of, I'll distill it down to sort of make it more general, but leaning on others, looking for resources outside of yourself to help you understand why this block is happening. Some people see that as a way to approach counseling and therapy. That's a great option. Personally, I'm a professional coach. I work with a lot of my colleagues on these kinds of things, those internal blocks that are holding them back. And I can sometimes help them get a better sense of where those blocks are coming from, whether it's their past work experience, how they grew up, it could be from a lot of different things. So having someone outside of the situation help you work through where that block is coming from is a really great tactic. So that's a great recommendation. Let's get one more. And if you want to share your own, that's okay too. But if you really think your partner did a great job of sort of being open and thinking about their fixed mindset, that's great too. Let's get one more, please. Brenda, we haven't heard from you yet. Anything that you'd like to share?
Sure. I don't mind sharing. So my partner talked about an apprehension or self-doubt when actually approaching a new assignment or something new at work or in her life. And so we talked about essentially what she mentioned she needed to do was to really write down some of the things that she knew how to do and how to get it done. So she knew that was one of the factors. The only thing that I mentioned or was able to add to the conversation is it's not something that's totally that's unheard of for me either. And I leverage a lot of relationships around me to remind me of times when I've had this thing or faced something that was new and had a bit of apprehension or self-doubt. And they were there to remind me of when I've been successful or when I've overcome that. And sometimes I was telling her, my best friend is like really good at that. She remembers things that I often forget and will remind me of those situations. And it helps to build my confidence to approach whatever it is I'm facing in my world.
That's great. Sounds like you have a really great friend there. What I'm hearing is that there's sort of an imposter syndrome thing happening where we really focus on where we're feeling like we can't achieve instead of remembering where we've been, how far we have come. We all made it through going to Tulane University and made it through a lot of Mardi Gras, and we're still here standing. So we've made it through something, right? We forget what we've overcome sometimes, and having someone else help you remember, these are all the amazing achievements you've had can be really helpful. Journaling can be really helpful for that as well. Letting yourself go back and read all the great things that you've done. At the end of every year, writing down your biggest achievements and having that record can be helpful too. Just little things we can do to remind ourselves when we're feeling that block that there's ways we can grow. Something I like, you'll see over here, I have a painting of the Tree of Life. This is something that helps me remember that there's wonder in growth, that you can look up and say, oh my God, this tree is so big, it's overwhelming. Or you can look up and say, oh my gosh, this tree has grown so big over so many years. How could it possibly have gotten there? How could I get there too? So I have that above my desk. I put it over there just to show it off. But that's a helpful reminder for me that there's always more growth available out there. That's what I do. That's how I help myself remember. Okay, great. Thank you guys for jumping into that, for being open with your partners. I hope that was a helpful experience. One other thing that I think is really helpful for that first step, and you all sort of alluded to it, is the idea of feedback. Feedback is tough. It has some pain involved with it too. And something that I like to do when I talk about feedback is share some of the feedback that I've gotten over the years. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to show you a couple of different catchy phrases that were just so much fun for me to hear from someone who is giving me feedback. And I'd love for y'all to just pick one of them real quick. Either whoever puts in the chat box first, just put the first couple of words in there if someone wants to come on the mic and tell me which story they want to hear. I got plenty of them. So feel free, someone either in the chat box or come on the mic and just pick one, and I'll tell the story. Which one sounds the worst, the most challenging? I'll give y'all 10 more seconds and then I'll just pick one myself.
Why don't you do the, I don't think you're ready for the job.
Happy to. So I don't think you're ready for the job. At this point in my career, I was looking to make a bit of a shift. So I had done a lot of facilitation, a lot of instruction, and I was really enjoying it. I was working on an internship program at the time, and there was another team that did a lot more sort of internal consultant work, that were helping other members of the organization that were typically in the leadership position figure out ways to help grow their team, restructure, create a new strategy, a new vision for their work, all that different kind of stuff. They were really internal consultants, and I loved it. I got to sit in on some of their meetings. I got to learn more about their work, to really interview some of them and learn more about what made them successful. And I really wanted to shift on to that team. And then I had a conversation with the head of the team. And basically he said, I don't think you're ready for this. I don't think you have the experience for it. I don't think you're necessarily the right person for this kind of work. I think you're probably better off being an expert instead of a consultant, and you should work towards that instead. This was tough feedback for me to hear. I was really set on moving this way, in this direction in my career, and it was tough. I don't personally still think he did necessarily the best job in delivering it, but that doesn't mean it wasn't true. You know how I know that? My next job was as a consultant, and it relates to the one in the middle here about being furloughed. Turns out it wasn't really a great role for me. I tried it. It didn't really align with my passions personally, and it wasn't really the greatest spot for me to be in. So the feedback was accurate. It was right, but it was hard for me to hear. And that's something that I want to dive into now. Feedback can be really, really challenging, and there's 3 different key components to it that I think are really rough to work through. And that's the following. First, we have to try to understand feedback that's shared with us. It can be really tough. Sometimes the person delivering it doesn't deliver it in the best way possible. Sometimes maybe they're uncomfortable with giving feedback and they sort of sputter through it and they feel uncomfortable even giving it to begin with. It can be really tough sometimes to really squeeze out that feedback and understand what's really behind it. So that's that first step. The next one is judging the feedback. Is this true? Is it right? Is what they're telling me really an accurate depiction of what my work product is or how I act in that situation? It's a tough one. And then lastly, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to incorporate this into your actual work or into your mindset? 3 different things here: understanding it, judging it, and incorporating it. With the story that I just shared, I understood what he was saying. I did. I didn't agree with it, but I understood it. So that disagreement is that judging piece. I didn't believe that what he was sharing was right. And then that last piece, when I'm coming to incorporate that feedback, I left my job. I took a new role instead against the feedback that was shared with me. That's how I went about it. Now, I don't think it was great. I think there were probably better things I could have done here, but that was what I did. That's the way that I approached those 3 steps. From my perspective, I think we're each weak in one of these 3. There's always room to grow in at least one of these 3 steps. And for that reason, I'm going to do a bit of an inception moment here. And if you haven't seen the movie, I'm sorry if that reference isn't all that relevant to you, but I'm going to do a bit of an inception moment and say, what are some warning signs that you might have room to grow in one of these stages? Talking about how feedback is important for growth, but I'm even going to say that there's room to grow in how we understand, judge, or incorporate feedback. So I'm asking a question here, pick one of them. And I'd love for someone to come on or to maybe put in the chat box, what might be a warning sign that there's room for you to grow in one of these 3 stages of receiving feedback? So we got a great response in the comment box here from Brenda. Hearing the feedback multiple times from multiple individuals. That's a good one, especially because that means it could be any of those three, right? Maybe you're not understanding the feedback. Like you're listening to it and you're trying to incorporate it, but you're not really getting it. So you keep on getting the feedback over and over. Maybe your judgment of the feedback isn't right, that you think, this feedback isn't that important. I don't think it's accurate. And therefore you're not, you keep getting it over and over again. Or maybe it's the last one. You're struggling to incorporate it. So you keep getting the feedback over and over. That's a really great thing to keep in mind. And then take that next step, right? If you have that challenge, figuring out which of those three situations is occurring for you. That's a great one. Thank you, Brenda. Can I get one more from the audience? One more warning sign that maybe one of these stages, has some room for you to grow?
Hey, Phil, this is Mike. Can I jump in with?
Yeah,
with
absolutely. Please do.
So I remember hearing once from someone about feedback is that there is a process we go through on the receiving end where we judge the feedback based on whether we believe the feedback is credible or from a credible source. And that obviously is open to interpretation. I think the more people know us and maybe know about our work or maybe the particular context in which the feedback has been given, likely impacts our evaluation as to whether that feedback is credible and whether we're really even listening to even understand, not even get to the judging point.
That's great. Yeah. How much can we trust a person that's sharing the feedback with us? Doesn't necessarily allow us to move through these phases sometimes. Is that sort of capturing what you're sharing?
Yeah, and as an additional piece, it's the intent, right? So I'm more likely to believe feedback and judge it positively if I believe that the feedback is well intended. If the person delivering the feedback genuinely cares about my development, my performance, my improvement, as opposed to how I might interpret maybe a different agenda in which the feedback's given.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be really hard to hear things that are critical about oneself when you don't really trust that the person sharing it actually has good intentions for you, that they want you to succeed, that they want you to grow. That's really, really challenging. Absolutely. And sometimes the hard truth is they could still be right. Doesn't mean we should, just all of a sudden believe that they have our best intention in mind, but sometimes they're still right, even if they come across in a way that seems demoralizing or like they're trying to push us down. Just a thought. Wendy?
Oh, I was also going to say, it doesn't even have to be that you're looking at it from, are they right, or I have a doubt in them personally for an alternative agenda. Sometimes judging it also comes to judging the market, the thing that they're saying the market needs. And maybe you don't have that skill set, but maybe you see a part of the market and you're struggling to say, maybe we need to grow a bit as a company or as an organization because we're missing something. So it's also that kind of space of, it's a good time to have that conversation about, are we really on track for our clientele and where the market's going? And in both cases can miss an opportunity to be flexible and have that winning conversation to be successful. And one's like, no, we're not changing. You need to be different, and our client and your clients lose out on the long run. Do you see more or a different side and that kind of space? I don't know if I'm explaining that well.
Yeah, you did a great job. What I think you do is actually provide some more depth into that judging phase. There's two ways I laid out that it's wrong or it's right. And I think you gave us a third way of, well, it might not be exactly right for the situation, but you are identifying that there's something here. There's something that needs to change or something that needs to grow. So I love that, Wendy. I think what you helped us see is that in that judging phase, it's not just binary, that it can also be that there's a different answer. And maybe the feedback isn't dead on, but it's identifying something that needs to change.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's great. Thank you for that. Great. Well, it sounds like you'll have some good ideas about what those warning signs might be for feedback. Now we are running a little low on time, so originally the plan was to put you all into some breakouts and have you do the same sort of thing, share a piece of feedback you've received and discuss how it's impacted your self-esteem, your emotions, your behaviors. and then think about what that next step might be. So what I'm going to do instead is ask you to once again, just go to your pen and paper, go to your Word document, and write this down for yourself, right? Think about that piece of feedback you received, maybe recently, maybe it was a while ago, and think about these three pieces. How did it affect you? Did it hit you right in your core, right in your self-esteem? Did it fuel that gremlin inside your head that says you're not good enough? Did it make you angry? Did it make you sad? How did it impact your emotions? And then how did it change your behavior? How did you react to it in a more physical, behavioral sense? So again, I'll give you maybe 2 minutes or so to just sort of, jot down what that feedback was and identify how it impacted you in this way. And then that last piece there, what happened, right? What are the steps that you took because of that feedback? Let's give yourself some credit and identify how you're able to grow and change because of that feedback you received. So I'll give you 2 more minutes to jot that down now. I'll give you 30 more seconds and then we'll jump back in. Okay, so I hope you've all had a chance to identify a time when you got some feedback about your career, your ability, and sort of took some time to reflect on how that impacted you, and maybe some of the steps you took because of that feedback. Really, really important to do that, and especially when we're thinking about this growth mindset. The feedback we receive from others, whether that be through a grade, through a conversation, through an annual review, through a raise or a salary change even, that feedback is the gold that we can mine to help us learn how we need to grow and help us understand where we might be fixed and where we might have that growth mindset. So really important to consider that feedback as well when it comes to having a growth mindset. There's a lot of gold in there, like I said. So what I want to do now, I want to do a quick wrap up, and then we're going to open up for any questions you might have. So to wrap us up, one thing I always like to do is share a couple of readings that I like to recommend, things that have been helpful for me and led to a lot of the content I created here. The first book here, like I mentioned before, is Mindset by Carol Dweck. If you're into this idea of a growth mindset, you want to learn more about it, that's a great place to go. Next book is Thanks for the Feedback, kind of self-explanatory, really dives into feedback, how to give it and how to receive it well. And then this last one here is a personal favorite of mine. It's called Crucial Conversations, and it's tools for when the stakes are high. So if you've ever been in one of those really high stress situations at work where there are ideas really at war with each other, there are differing opinions, and it's hard to know how to work through it, Crucial Conversations is a great resource for that. So here are 3 books that I like to recommend. I can put them in the comment box or in the Q&A if you like, but these are the 3 that I think have been really helpful for me. final thoughts, and then we'll go to questions here. So one thing we've talked about a lot, that you need to identify those areas of fixed mindset within yourself. And then a lot of you touched on the idea that going to outside counsel, going to outside friends is a really great way to help you understand how you can move through those fixed mindsets. I didn't plant that, y'all just shared it. And it really is a great thing to remember, that we have to identify internally and then seek externally. Bad news, this never stops. Or maybe good news, this never stops. There's always ways that we can grow and change and develop. And if you have that mindset about it, then it unlocks your potential. It unlocks this mentality that I'm done, I'm finished. There's always ways that we can grow. And last thing, only you can make that shift. If there is something in your way right now that is stopping you from growing, that is stopping you from excelling in your career, that is stopping you from leaving that job that just is not right for you, but you have this idea that you're not good enough for anything else, only you can make that shift. And this is vital, because it is the hardest thing for us to believe sometimes. We want to believe that sometimes the universe can just make that change for us. And sometimes that can happen. There is some cosmic order out there, but you got to make that shift yourself. It's got to be within you. So that's the sort of that final thought to wrap up this conversation. But I'll leave one of my great inspirations to share their final thought for us as well. And that is, of course, Mufasa from The Lion King, who said to look inside yourself, that you are always more than what you have become. Love that line. It's one of my favorites. I think it's really powerful. And it's a great message to his son to help him become the Lion King. So always had to put that in there. But now I want to move to any questions you might have. And as a special treat for you, I'll share a picture of someone who was celebrating Mardi Gras. I don't know who that is. Seems like a pretty crazy guy with a pretty wild costume. I don't know who it is, but just wanted to share that with you all. So any questions y'all have for me, happy to address them. I'll also make sure to stay on a little bit towards the end if you'd like to share any questions one-on-one.
Phil, it's Janice. I just wanted to thank you for this session today. And I really enjoyed meeting my session partner, Brenda. She was very helpful with her comments.
Great. I'm glad to hear that, Janice. And Brenda, sounds like you made a difference. So thank you too. If you don't have any questions, feel free to head out. I should have shared contact information. I will make sure to do that. Through maybe Nicole can help me out with that. But just to put it in the chat box, I will do it right now in case you want to reach out to me in the future. Or in case you're curious to learn more about my organization. Like I said, we're a nonprofit law firm that pretty exclusively represents people who are at threat of government overreach. We have our own definition for what that is. Maybe you agree, maybe you don't. But if you're curious to learn more about that, you can head to pacificlegal.org or email me as well, just to put that out there.
Thank you so much, Phil. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us today. You'll see in the chat, I put a link to where you can find the recording of this session later today. That's where all of our professional development series recordings go. So if you missed one in the past, please feel free to check out that video as well. But it'll be ready by 5 o'clock this afternoon. And we hope to see you next week at our next professional development series, where we'll be talking about cybersecurity and the tech sector. So thank you all so much for joining us. And we hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Nicole, and thanks everyone else as well.